These are the times that try men's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will, at this time, shrink from the service of his country. But he that stands by it now deserves the love and thanks of man and woman. Thomas Paine published The American Crisis at a pretty dark moment in this history of our early country. We had suffered defeats at Long Island and Washington Heights. And now there were men trying to leave the Continental Army in droves. However, after Thomas Paine published The American Crisis on December 19th, 1776, General George Washington, about a week later, was able to secure his first strategic victory against the British at the Battle of Long Island. At the Battle of Trenton, I mean. After that, European powers like France and Spain decided that this American cause might be the thorn in the side of the British enemy that they've been looking for some time. So, the French and Spanish started to send supplies, men in uniforms to help the Continental Army. It was a true turning point in the war. And what's more, there were other individuals from around Europe that decided to join up with the rebel cause in the Continental Army. Men from France, from Germany, from Spain, from Ireland, and from Poland. I figure it's only right, considering we are a nation of immigrants, we take a look at those immigrants who helped form the Continental Army and give this country the foundation it needed. First off, I think we should begin with the French soldiers, beginning with probably the best known French commander of all, the Marquis de Lafayette.
Marie-Joseph Paul-Yves Roche Gilbert de Motier, the Marquis de Lafayette, grew up in Auvergne, the son of a French grenadier officer who was killed in action against the British. At 14, the young Marquis was commissioned in the Royal Musketeers, but after hearing of the American uprisings against the British, he negotiated with Silas Deane for a post in the new Continental Army, believing in the American cause for liberty. Using a hefty sum of his own money, Lafayette traveled first to South Carolina and then to Philadelphia to receive his commission. At first he was refused, until he offered to work for free, after which he served on General George Washington's staff, the general viewing the young Marquis like a son. Lafayette saw his first action at the Battle of Brandywine, where he arranged an orderly retreat of the American forces despite being shot in the leg. After some recuperation, he defeated a larger Hessian force at the Battle of Gloucester, endured the winter of 1777 to 1778 at Valley Forge, and even stood loyal with General Washington during the Conway cabal. At the Battle of Monmouth, he was able to bring General Washington to the front to achieve an American victory. After drumming up more support for the Americans in France, Lafayette returned to America, and during the summer of 1781, pursued the British forces through Virginia, and with the help of double agent James Armistead, gathered enough intelligence to achieve an American victory at Yorktown. After Yorktown, Lafayette returned to France, where he was greeted as a hero. After the signing of the Treaty of Paris, the Marquis campaigned for the rights of his people, and became a fervent abolitionist. During the French Revolution, Lafayette was imprisoned due to his connections with executed Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette. In 1797, a young Napoleon Bonaparte brokered his release, and Lafayette returned to his chateau of Lagrange. His last visit to the United States was in 1825, and he passed away in 1834. His grave in Paris is covered in soil from Mount Vernon, and decorated with an American flag. Many other French officers served in the Continental Army besides Lafayette, including the likes of Louis Antoine Cambray-Digny, who served as an engineer in the Continental Army, erecting fortifications in Pennsylvania and the Carolinas before being captured along with Benjamin Lincoln's army at the siege of Charleston. François de Fleury was yet another French engineer, who served with distinction under General Anthony Wayne during the Battle of Stony Point. Jean-Bernard Gauthier-Monan served as Major of Engineers under General John Sullivan. Jean-Joseph Sourbadeur de Gemma came to America with Lafayette, serving as the Marquis' aide and later serving valiantly at Green Spring and Yorktown. Pierre-Charles L'Enfant served as a captain of engineers and even made some sketches of George Washington. After the Revolution, he planned out a design for the nation's new capital of Washington, D.C. Charles Armand, Marquis de la Rouerie, survived a shipwreck on his trek to America and became colonel of the Pulaski Legion of Cavalry, serving from the New York campaign to Yorktown. Thomas Antoine Duplessis was a highly valuable artillery commander during the battles of Germantown, Red Bank, and Monmouth. Stephen Rochefontaine failed to join the French Royal Corps of Engineers, but was a valuable captain of engineers during the siege of Yorktown.
Of course, not all the French commanders were entirely reliable. François Malmedy was hot-headed, arrogant, and unwilling to take on any jobs he thought that were beneath him. In 1781, he was killed in a duel by Major Smith Sneed of Virginia. Another difficult foreign officer was General Charles Lee.
Lee was born in the English county of Cheshire and served in the 44th Foot during the French and Indian War. After further service in Portugal and in the Polish Army, Lee bought an estate in Virginia close to his friend Horatio Gates's home. Unlike many British-born subjects, Lee was sympathetic to the Patriot cause and was even considered to command the new Continental Army before George Washington was chosen. Early on in the war, Lee proved himself valuable by fortifying the city of Charleston, South Carolina, but soon became a critic of General Washington after the loss of Forts Washington and Lee in late 1776. However, Lee himself would soon be captured while staying at an inn in New Jersey. Lee was released from British custody in 1778, but was unaware of the change in formation of the Continental Army during his absence. He often went over Washington's head to lobby for a higher position in the Continental Army, but alas, to no avail. At the Battle of Monmouth, Lee led a vanguard to attack the British rearguard of Sir Henry Clinton. However, Clinton took notice of this attack and sent his main forces to attack Lee's Americans. Lee never gave any specific orders to his subordinates, and soon his troops began crumbling away, eventually provoking a general retreat. When Washington got wind of Lee's retreat, he confronted Lee and relieved him of command. At the battle's end, an astounding American victory, Lee was arrested and court-martialed. He was found guilty, and he was suspended from the army for a year. After Congress received another one of his letters, his service was fully terminated. Lee retired to his property in Virginia and died of fever in 1782.
Charles Lee's example shows that there were a few foreign-born officers who were a bit wary of Washington's command of his troops.
Irish-born General Thomas Conway was another of this category. Conway was born in Ireland but moved to France as a child and grew up to serve as a colonel in the Irish Brigade of the French Army. In 1777, Conway volunteered for service in the Continental Army and proved himself on the field at Germantown. However, when Conway got wind that General Washington opposed his promotion to Major General, Conway wrote to General Horatio Gates criticizing Washington's failures. There was one problem, though. Washington's staff intercepted Conway's letter, and Conway lost his command. After fighting a duel with General John Cadwalader in July 1778, Conway submitted an apology to Washington and left for France. He served the Royalists during the French Revolution, for which he was condemned to death. He was able to flee from France, but disappeared from history, possibly dying around the year 1800.
If there was one country known for its army, it would be the countries that would go on to create the modern state of Germany, especially the city-state of Prussia. And the foremost of those Prussian officers in the Continental Army was the Baron Friedrich Wilhelm von Steuben.
Von Steuben served as a captain in the Prussian army and an aide-de-camp to King Frederick the Great during the 7 Years' War. After the war, though, he was forced to leave the army due to allegations of homosexuality. By 1775 was deeply in debt. In 1777, von Steuben was introduced to Benjamin Franklin in Paris, and that year he packed up his Greyhound and set sail for America. He met the Continental Army at Valley Forge that winter, after General Washington set him up as an inspector general. The Baron rigorously drilled the American troops at Valley Forge and wrote a training manual for soldierly conduct and camp setup, along with enforcing accurate bookkeeping within the army. Baron von Steuben's efforts reaped results after the battles of Baron Hill and Monmouth. In 1780, he sat on the court-martial for British spymaster John Andre, and worked with Generals Greene and Lafayette on campaigns in the South, leading up to the victory at Yorktown. In March 1784, von Steuben was discharged from the military and became a United States citizen, and settled near Oneida, New York, where he died in 1794. Of course, von Steuben wouldn't have been able to obtain his position without help from another Prussian officer, Henry Leonard Darent. Darent volunteered for the Continental Army and commanded the German battalion after its former commander, a Swiss mercenary named Nicholas Hausiger, defected to the British, along with Baron de Otterdorf. Darent was loyal to the Patriot cause, but was forced out of the service due to health concerns. Baron Johann de Kalb, though, proved more steadfast. He was a Bavarian officer in the French army, and came to America with the Marquis de Lafayette. De Kalb commanded troops in the Carolinas, and served under Horatio Gates at the Battle of Camden. During the battle, de Kalb's horse was shot out from under him, and he was shot and bayoneted by Cornwallis's British troops. General Cornwallis himself saw to de Kalb's medical treatment, but the Baron died 3 days after the battle. Friedrich von Weissenfels was a Prussian soldier who had served in the Netherlands and in the British Army during the French and Indian War, and he settled in New York at the war's end. In the Continental Army, he saw service at White Plains, Trenton, Saratoga, and Monmouth, and served in the Sullivan Expedition, and hounded Loyalists in the backwoods of New York. David Ziegler was a Palatine who served in the Prussian and Russian armies, later emigrating to Pennsylvania in 1775. He served in the Continental Army at Long Island, Brandywine, Germantown, Monmouth, and Valley Forge, and served as drill inspector for the Pennsylvania Brigade.
Often overlooked during the Revolution are the contributions made by the Polish, who were about to lose their own country to other heavier powers.
Colonel Tadeusz Kościuszko studied in Warsaw and Paris, but had to leave Europe after trying to elope with the daughter of his employer. In 1776, he sailed to America and was assigned to the Continental Army as a colonel of engineers. At the Battle of Saratoga, Kościuszko's engineers did everything in their power to stall British General John Burgoyne's army by felling trees and damming rivers to overflowing, and set up a fortification at Bemis Heights, eventually setting the ground for an American victory. Afterwards, Kościuszko set about fortifying West Point, and following Nathaniel Greene in his campaigns in the South, fortifying Continental positions and harassing British foraging parties. In 1784, he returned to Poland and fought in the Polish-Lithuanian army against Russia. He was captured, but he was set free by Tsar Paul I. He returned to America in 1797, and with the help of Thomas Jefferson, he returned to Europe in 1798 to broker a peace deal between Poland and France's Napoleon Bonaparte, albeit to no avail. He settled in Switzerland, where he died in 1817. Another Polish officer was Jan de Mieszkowski, who served with the Duke of Lauzun's cavalry in Rhode Island, and then at Yorktown, where he managed to wound General Bannister Tarleton in combat. But by far the finest Polish horseman in the Continental Army was Casimir Pulaski. Pulaski fought in the Polish-Lithuanian army against Russia, but when that failed, he was exiled to France and lived in debt until he was recruited into the Continental Army by Benjamin Franklin and the Marquis de Lafayette. At the Battle of Brandywine, Pulaski crafted an orderly retreat of American cavalrymen, and was made Brigadier General of Cavalry by General Washington. He went on to serve at Germantown and Valley Forge, and upon joining with General Horatio Gates, formed the Pulaski Cavalry Legion. The Legion served at the Siege of Savannah. While Pulaski tried to rally the fleeing French forces attached to the Legion, he was hit by grape shot and died just 2 days later.
One of Pulaski's subordinates was a Hungarian officer by the name of Michael Kovats, to Fabriczy.
Kovats served in the armies of Austria and Prussia during the 7 Years' War. In 1777, he offered his services to Benjamin Franklin and joined the Continental Army under Casimir Pulaski. Kovats offered to train a division of hussars in a style similar to the hussars of Hungary, almost indistinguishably so. During the siege of Charleston in 1779, Kovats was killed in action. To this day, Kovats is commemorated in the halls of the Citadel Military College in Charleston.
Those are but a few of the foreign-born officers who served in George Washington's army. There were several others, some of whose stories have never been told before. If I left out anybody of major importance, feel free to say so. Now, this is the winter of our discontent for sure. Despite the fact I'm only recording this in October.